Governor Hogan, thank you for having a conversation with us. For so many months now, you've been considering a run for the Republican presidential nomination. Have you made a decision?
I have, Bob. You know, I just want to thank the people all across the country that have been encouraging me to consider running for president. I was flattered by that, and I did give it serious consideration. I talked to people everywhere, and I talked to my family, and it was a tough decision, but I've decided that I will not be a candidate for the Republican nomination for president. I care very deeply about the country and my party. I think I've been a voice of reason to try to get us back to a place where we have a more hopeful, positive vision for America. And I think we made a difference. And I don't plan on walking away. I'm going to continue to stay involved in that fight for the soul of the Republican Party, but I'm just not going to do it as a candidate for president.
Governor, what brought you to this point to say no thanks to jumping into the Republican presidential race?
Well, you know, it wasn't something I was actively pursuing. There were a lot of people encouraging me, and I was listening, and I was willing to give it serious consideration. But I'm a lifelong small business owner who really did not have any desire to be a career politician. And I ran for governor in Maryland because I wanted to make a difference. I think we did make a difference in a very difficult environment. But my focus was never on what's the next office I can get elected to. It was really more about how can I make the biggest difference and how can I contribute. And I think I can continue to contribute toward getting the Republican Party back to a more traditional big tent party that can win elections again without causing being part of a train wreck that might repeat history and just allow us to nominate Donald Trump as our nominee, because I think that would be bad for the party and bad for the country.
What was the political calculation here in terms of trying to stop former President Trump from getting the nomination?
Really, I just don't believe that he was the right person to lead the party, and we've proven that, and we've lost the last 3 elections in a row. And I've been saying for years now that I want us to get back to a party that appeals to a broader group of people so we can win elections and we can get back to governing. I thought he was not going to be able to do that. I still believe that he's not the right one to do it. Luckily, a lot of people are starting to think along the lines and say the things that I've been saying. And so now I think we're going to have the potential of a number of common sense conservative candidates running. And I think we're going to have a long primary fight to kind of determine who the best one is. And I certainly intend to be a part of that discussion and that effort.
When you looked at this possibility, were you saying to yourself you didn't want a large field that could maybe enable Trump to have an easier path to the nomination? How did you see this playing out as you thought about your own role?
It really wasn't just about that. It was really about, you know, how can I best contribute, but really what's best for me and my family. I've left it all on the field in a really difficult environment. We're going through a lot of struggles for the past 8 years. And I think done a very good job. People seem to be happy with the job I did as governor of Maryland. But I wasn't sure if it was the right thing for me personally or for my wife and my kids to go through that grueling battle, especially if there were other people that could pick up the mantle, and if my being in the race might actually contribute to the result I didn't want to have.
Were there any personal or family considerations?
Yeah, certainly the family considerations had probably as much to do with it as anything. It was really just talking with my wife and my daughters and even my grandkids to see what they thought about the idea.
What did they say to you?
It was sort of a split decision, I would say. You know, it wasn't unanimous in one way, one direction or the other. I think my wife put it best when she said, you know, it's in God's hands. Whatever decision you make, I'm going to support you. And so that's what it came down to. But I had some in the family lobbying pretty hard, saying I needed to do it, and I was the only one that could do it. And I had others that saying, wow, we don't really want to go through all of that.
It's got to be a little tough. You have a long career in business, but you also have politics in your blood.
Yeah.
Your late father, Larry Hogan Sr., served in the U.S. House of Representatives, was the Republican who voted for the articles of impeachment against Nixon. So you do have a lot of politics in your life.
Well, I learned an awful lot about politics and public service and integrity from my dad. And I'll tell you, this decision, I was thinking about my dad. And, you know, he was a guy who put the country ahead of his party and ahead of his own personal considerations, and he did what he thought was the best thing for the country. And so I think that's what I'm doing right now. It wasn't about me trying to find a higher office, it's about me trying to get the country back in the right direction.
You're a traditional Republican. You have long defined yourself as a conservative Republican. Did you look at this race and say, the path for a Republican like me, like Larry Hogan, is maybe too narrow?
Well, there's no question it's challenging. There's a big fight for I would say the heart and soul of the Republican Party that I've been talking about for years. It's still going on. We're making progress, though. I mean, it went from about 90% of the Republican primary base was behind Trump to about 60% after January 6th to it's down to about 30% now. There's about 2/3 of the people in the Republican Party, while they might have supported Trump and Trump's policies, they really are ready to consider moving in a different direction.
But he's still leading the polls.
He's leading in the polls, and there's no question he's a formidable challenge. But I think, a year is an eternity in politics, and the first primaries are about a year away. So I think what it looks like today, it could be completely different than what it looks like a year from now.
You are a two-term governor, just left office. You've long been connected to the legacy of Ronald Reagan, conservative movement politics. Is your decision to not run in 2024 in any way an acknowledgement that that party, that version of the Republican Party, is fading or even gone?
I don't feel that way at all. I think we certainly went off in the wrong direction, and we're not back on track. I'm very concerned about this next election, which is why I'm going to continue to stay involved. But I do think we're slowly getting back to the Republican Party that I know of, the Republican Party that's fighting for fiscal responsibility, that's fighting for peace through strength and a stronger military presence, and a party that stands up against the violent crime that's happening across the country. But it's going to take a while. We're not there yet. I would say the party of Reagan is not dead, and neither is the party of Trump.
But maybe it's on life support.
Well, I think we're actually heading in the right direction, but we've got a long way to go.
You've called this current version of the Republican Party, though, a cult of personality.
Yeah.
Around former President Trump. Is it a cult of personality right now?
I think it has been, and perhaps to a certain segment it continues to be. And I think it's really important that we get back to focusing on ideas, that we have we didn't even have a platform in 2020. We didn't have ideas that we agreed on. It was all about a cult of personality. And we've got to get back away from that, or we're going to continue to lose elections. We've got to be the party of ideas. We have to be the party of common sense and the party of competence. It's really why I've been one of the most successful governors in America as a Republican in a blue state, by just telling it straight and by saying what we stood for, by standing up for regular folks and tell them how we were going to help them. It's what most people want. They just want people that, regardless of party, that are going to focus on problems. And right now they don't see, either party being that focused on solving problems that are important to them.
In order to stop Trump from winning your party's nomination, would you encourage other like-minded Republicans to stay out of the race like you?
I think everyone's got to make their own decision, but I would say this. I don't think anyone should run as a vanity project or run to get their name out there so they can get a cabinet position or get a book deal. You should only run if you really believe that you have what it takes to turn the country around and they have a chance to win. And I think a lot of people are going to have to make that decision for themselves, just like I did for myself.
Does the party need to move on from Trump?
No question about that. I've been saying this for quite some time. I've been saying that for about 6 years now. I was the first to say it after the 2020 election at the Reagan Institute. I think we've got to move on from Trump if we're going to be successful.
But can it?
I think we can. And so there are people who still really like Trump's policies, but they're now saying they're tired of the drama and they'd like to see us move forward rather than constantly focusing on the past.
You say Trump can be beat in the Republican primary race, but by whom?
Well, that's what we're going to have to find out. Well, look, if you go back to a year before the 2016 election, Donald Trump was at less than 1% and Jeb Bush was the leader. So my point is, we don't know who it's going to be yet. Somebody has to come forward. It's not going to be you,
so who's it going to be?
It's not going to be me.
Who's going to be that foil?
I'm hoping, I think we're going to have a number of current and former governors that are be in the race. I happen to believe that it's a good training ground. I think being a governor in an executive capacity is a great background to be president. But I don't believe we should have a coronation. I don't think right now we should appoint, this is the one that it should be. I'm a big believer in competition and people getting out there and debating their ideas and their positions, and let the voters decide who's going to be the strongest person for us.
Are you going to make an endorsement anytime soon?
You know, I'll see how the campaign plays out. We're going to continue to watch, but I don't have any intentions in the near future to make any endorsements. I'm going to be like the rest of the voters out there and see who I think is going to do the best job.
How serious is this moment for your party in terms of beating former President Trump? If he wins the White House again, what would that mean for American democracy?
Well, I'm hopeful that it's not going to happen.
But what does it mean if it does?
Then I think it's we're going to have to do some soul searching. We're going to be digging out for a long time. But look, we've lost 7 out of the last 8 popular votes in the presidential race, and we've had 3 horrible election cycles where we should have had a huge pickup in the last election. We didn't. We lost before that the Senate, the House, and the White House. We've got to start getting back to a party that people will vote for, or we don't get to govern.
If Trump wins the nomination, could he beat President Biden in a general election?
Right now, I think something like 65% of the people in America do not want Donald Trump or Joe Biden to be president.
What do you think?
I don't think either one of them should be president either. Again, it's a long way off. We don't know that Biden's going to run yet, and we only have 2 people that say they're running on the Republican side.
Someone with your politics, traditional Republican politics, might be in a tough position come November 2024 if Trump's the nominee. If it was Trump versus Biden, where would you go?
Well, I didn't vote for Trump or Biden in the last election, and I probably wouldn't do it again in the next election.
And if Trump is the Republican nominee, is there any world, any way you would ever support him as the Republican presidential nominee?
I don't believe he's qualified to be president, should not be president. I didn't vote for him before, and he's done nothing to convince me otherwise.
And if he was the nominee, you wouldn't show up at the convention in Milwaukee?
I didn't show up at the last 2 conventions either.
The RNC right now is saying that if anyone wants to be on this debate stage for the primaries, they have to pledge to support the eventual nominee. A good call or bad call by the RNC?
I don't believe the call. I think it's silly because we know Donald Trump has already repeatedly said in every election, no, he would not support the nominee of the party. And they're not going to keep Donald Trump off the stage. The RNC is not going to do that. So I think it's a lot of nonsense.
Former President Trump continues to say Medicare and Social Security should be off the table. Is that where the Republican Party's moving? And do you agree with that movement?
I think they long term we've got to take a look at all of the entitlements, but right now I think you have to take Medicare and Social Security off the table. We've got to figure out other ways. There are a lot of other mandatory spending programs and other entitlements we need to take a look at. But first thing we need to do is get people talking to one another. When we have the president and the Speaker of the House both saying it's my way or the highway, and we're not going to negotiate. That's not the way to get things done. In our state, we have 70% Democratic legislature, and we came together and found compromise and common ground. We need adults in Washington that are going to be willing to actually sit down, roll up their sleeves, and solve problems. And right now, it's just everybody messaging against the other side.
When you look at what's happened with the Trump years, his presidency, his post-presidency, and you make this decision not to run, I have to wonder, have you ever reflected and thought about leaving the Republican Party?
Well, I can tell you that I hear from people all the time who have. The largest growing segment right now are independent, unaffiliated voters. People are leaving both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party because they're frustrated. But I've never personally considered. I'm a diehard, lifelong Republican, have been since I was a little kid, long before I could actually be old enough to register to vote. I was president of Young Republicans and a chairman of Youth for Reagan, and it's a party that I believe in.
But is it
even though I'm very concerned about where we are.
It's not that party.
Instead of just giving up and walking away, I've been trying to do everything I can to get back to the party that I was proud of.
You think it really can come back to kind of what it was?
I'm absolutely optimistic that it can come back. I can't guarantee you how fast it's going to come back, whether that's going to be in this election or if it's going to take another 4 years or 8 years. But if we're going to be competitive, if we're going to have a healthy, competitive two-party system in America, then it's got to come back. We can't continue to shrink the tent and lose elections.
You've said you will not run for the Republican presidential nomination, but what about an independent or third-party, no-labels bid down the line in the next year or two? Is that on the table?
That's really not something I'm considering at all.
So you're not going to run for president in the 2024 cycle?
Certainly not something that we're contemplating at this point in time.
When you look at your effort to try to get the Republican Party to come back to its conservative roots, you're facing a lot of obstacles. There's a big battle over what the truth is. And the recent Dominion lawsuit against the Fox News, the Fox Corporation, is one example of how there's a real battle over whether election fraud happened or not. all these false claims of fraud are out there right now in the political discussion, especially on the right. What's your response to the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News, and what does that reveal about the Republican Party and perhaps Fox News?
Well, I don't know all the details of the Dominion lawsuit, but I'm certainly following the controversy, and it doesn't come as a surprise because for years we've had people who, I would hear from elected officials and leaders of the party and people in Congress or fellow governors or people in conservative media that would say privately something. I was always telling the truth, and I was, sometimes criticized for it, but I always stood up and said exactly what I thought. People would say to me, "Oh, I agree with what you're saying, but I can't say it," or they would, they would know the truth, but say something different just to win votes, and I think that's part of the problem. And I think we've got to get back to truth-telling, and we've got to stop the conspiracy theories. It's why we lost all the elections in this last race. I mean, the people that were spouting election lies and that were saying that nothing happened on January 6th or that the pandemic was fake, the virus didn't happen, they all lost. And the people who actually won were the common sense conservative Republicans like me, who were actually able to win swing votes and that were talking about issues like the economy, like crime and education. They were focused on things people cared about. We can't keep looking backward, and we can't keep, denying facts.
Stopping Trump is one thing. It also matters who is that person who's stopping Trump.
It's important.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis right now is on a book tour. He's getting a lot of attention. He's also battled Disney. He's fought culture wars in Florida. Is Governor DeSantis somebody you could see yourself supporting as the non-Trump candidate in your party?
Well, look, the people of Florida just overwhelmingly elected Ron DeSantis. I've said earlier that I think governors are a good training ground to become president. We have a lot of great governors to consider. Maybe Ron DeSantis and I have different styles, but certainly he's got every right to get out there and make the case. And I don't know if he's going to be a candidate or not. He hasn't announced it yet. But if that's something he's seriously interested in doing, he's got to get out there and fight for it just like everybody else. And I think the voters are going to decide whether he's the candidate or not. We've got to elect someone that has the ability to win a general election, not just a primary.
Where do you stand on Governor DeSantis' efforts to counter Disney and its self-governing zone in Florida?
The controversy to me, it was about telling a business that if you don't agree with me, I'm going to put you out of business or take it over. And I'm a traditional kind of small government conservative Republican who doesn't believe in heavy-handed, local governments telling businesses what to do. So we come at it from a different perspective. It's not about the issues themselves that they were fighting over, but how it's being handled, I would disagree with.
When you talk about your conservatism, you cite President Reagan. You talk about your father. When Governor DeSantis is out there on the book trail right now, he's talking about his battles with Disney. He's talking about his battles with what he calls woke culture. What does the DeSantis approach tell you about his politics?
Well, I think he's going right after the Trump base, and he wants to be, I think, the younger, version of Donald Trump. And, he's trying to fire up the base, which is okay, and it may be a good strategy to win a primary. But my point was you have to actually focus on winning swing voters as well, or we'll have Joe Biden as president, and that's not what we need.
Are you trying to stop Trump or Trumpism as well?
I think I'm trying to stop Trumpism, but I'm really trying to return to real republicanism. I say I come from the Republican wing of the Republican Party, not the Trump or MAGA wing, and I think there are a lot of people out there that would like to see us return to a traditional Republican Party.
If you would run for president, I can just see it now. You would have been on that debate stage, and you would have been one of the leading traditional Republicans who has a conservative bearing, operating as a Trump critic to his face. Some of the other contenders don't like doing that to his face. You've done it to his face. Who's going to do that now in the Republican race?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I think more and more people are starting to come out and show some courage and say things that they were afraid to say before.
What about New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu? He seems
There's no
a bit in your
question.
neighborhood politically.
Chris Sununu and I agree on a lot of issues, and he's now starting to come out and say many of the things I've been saying for years. We're starting to hear some of the people that were part of the Trump administration that are repeating some of the things that I've been saying. You know, you're seeing people kind of move slowly but surely away from Trump, and that debate stage will be a while from now, but hopefully some people will have the courage to stand up and tell it like it is. And it's not just to be, I never really focused on being a Trump critic. When I disagreed, I just told you what I thought. I didn't spend my time just attacking Trump. I was focused on running my state.
But you would take him on directly, which so many are
I wasn't afraid
reluctant to do.
I think more and more people are going to hopefully gain a little more courage and start to speak out. I think they are starting to, and I think it'll continue.
But so many of them, I mean, you look at former Ambassador Nikki Haley. It seems like you just referenced her campaign. Yeah. The former ambassador in the Trump administration at the UN. They seem to be launching campaigns, but not wanting to take on Trump directly. Is that a mistake?
You know, I think that's for each of them to decide, and we'll find out when we go through the process, but I certainly wouldn't run a campaign like that.
You believe if you run against someone like Donald Trump, you have to actually run against Trump?
I think you will, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens between DeSantis and Trump, because right now DeSantis is sort of avoiding Trump, and Trump is attacking him, but I'm not sure how long that's going to last.
How rough could it get, DeSantis versus Trump?
Could get rough, you know. Time will tell. It's going to be very interesting, and I just hope that we can come out of it with the best nominee that has the best chance to win in November, because the Democrats have taken us in a far left direction. Joe Biden is not the guy who should be the next president, and I think most people would agree, but you can't beat somebody with nobody. We have to come up with the best candidate.
You mentioned Governor Sununu. He was recently on Face the Nation, and he took on DeSantis, referenced his, quote, big government approach in Florida.
Yeah, I've been saying that for, you know, almost a year, and I saw the conversation you had with Sununu, and actually, you know, I agreed with him.
Why did you agree with him?
Well, because I agree with him that I believe in a small government, you know, Republican philosophy, and that in some cases overstepping your bounds. It's not about, you know, the positions on the particular issues. It's having one person tell a business what they can and can't think or do.
Do you think DeSantis wields the government as a weapon down there against businesses? How do you see it?
I wouldn't put it that way, but obviously the people in Florida seem to be happy with the representation they're getting, and time will tell about how well that sells across the country.
You've been friendly with former Vice President Mike Pence. Someone you could support?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Mike Pence, and I thought he certainly you know, is the kind of guy, he's full of integrity and experience, and we served as fellow governors together on RGA Executive Committee. I thought, you know, I admired him for standing up and doing the right thing on January 6th. So, you know, he's certainly somebody that's qualified to be president.
We're here at your office near Annapolis, Maryland, in Annapolis, and you've long been in the real estate business before you served 2 terms as Maryland's governor. What now for Larry Hogan?
Well, you know, I've always been a business guy. I never really had any desire to become a professional politician, so I'm going to return to the private sector, but I'm not walking away from politics. I still care just as much. I'm still going to be the same voice I always was, and I'm going to continue to stand out and try to make a difference. So while I may be back, you know, making a living and not being a politician, I'm still going to be in the fight to bring the Republican Party back on track and to get the country back on the right direction.
Do you want to keep traveling the country?
I'm sure I'm going to stay involved and continue. I think we'll be in Iowa in the next week or so. I'll be 2 weeks from now, I guess. So I'll be out with Nikki Haley and Mike Pence and Joni Ernst, and we got trips to New York and Florida, and we're going to continue to travel around. I'm going to keep saying the things I've been saying, and I'm going to continue to try to do everything I can to make a difference.
But just to come back to your decision, you say you're not a career politician, and you weren't a career politician. You were in the private sector for many years, but you were in the national conversation for almost the last decade, since you won in an upset here in Maryland. It has to have been tough to arrive at a conclusion, having covered you for so long, that this party, this race, just not the time for you.
Well, it's interesting. I ran for governor because I was frustrated and I wanted to make a difference, and we did. You know, we took a state that was 49th out of 50 states in economic performance and took it to number 6. It was the biggest economic turnaround in America. I'm really proud that I left office with a 77% approval rating, with people of every, you know, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. They think we did a great job, and that's enough. You know, I left it all in the field. I never thought I had to run for another office. I'm very proud of the record, the team that we had. everything that we accomplished, and I'm going to continue to do everything I can to contribute in whatever way I can.
And you do believe Trump can be beat?
I think he can.
He's winning the polls right now.
It's a long way from when we actually make the real polls.
I talked to some strategists and donors, and Governor, they say, if people keep choosing not to run, who knows? Maybe he just waltzes to the nomination again.
Well, it's certainly possible, but so far I think not too many people have said they're not going to run. I think I'm out there at the front trying to make a decision, and we'll see what other people, how they make their decisions.
And if another potential contender is listening to you today, what do you hope they hear from this decision, from your move?
Well, I hope that, I think people really have, I love competition, and I hate coronation, so I hope we'll have a competitive primary, and I think people have to make that decision for themselves. A lot goes into it, but my advice would be don't run just because you want to get your name known, or you want to be on TV, or you want to write a book, or get a TV deal, or because you want to be a cabinet secretary. You should only run if you believe that you're capable and qualified and that you have a real chance to be not only the nominee, but the next president.